Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are back with another question. Is the food that we eat killing us? Nice, short and sweet. I actually got my cousin Megan here to talk. She's the one who's been telling me that my Diet Coke has been trying to kill me for the last 20 years, and I wasn't listening. And then I saw an article, like, I don't know, 6 months ago that was like, hey, the aspartame is killing you. And I was like, she was right. I knew it.
Oh, zero sugar. I don't know which one is in that, isn't it?
So
Stevia or
this
something?
is this is where is it?
Is that the
I'll find it.
Splenda or the
It's got
Yeah.
aspartame in it.
aspartame?
It's
Yeah.
but it's got some other stuff in it too. What's interesting is the zeros. Um, for whatever reason, taste different than the diet whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Pepper Zero tastes like a Dr. Pepper. And
Mm-hmm.
for a while, I was drinking Dr. Pepper tins because they had like 10% regular Dr. Pepper to give it, not the aftertaste. And I just need to get off sodas in general. I've worked at it for years, but my stress drink has never been alcohol. My stress drink has always been sodas because I grew up in a household where we had a case of soda. We had cases of soda next to the fridge and a whole shelf that was dedicated to it. And I learned to
Mhm.
drink and like Dr. Pepper, Coke, whatever, hot, because that was the only way I could get to them before they got drank out of the fridge. So, I mean, which is, it's the 80s. We didn't know any better. People were still smoking in their house and smoking on airplanes, and I mean, but I'm diabetic now, so yes, my food's trying to kill me, right?
Yeah.
And I've just moved into that diabetic threshold. And what's interesting about this is my father's also diabetic, and so is my mom. But my father's on insulin, and he is now wearing a device which it can plug into your arm or on your abs
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere, and it monitors your sugar level constantly. And because he's on insulin and diabetic, it's covered 100% on his Medicare, Medicaid type insurance. My doctor tried to get me a less advanced one, and same company, but a less advanced one. And I went to go pick up the prescription, and I'm hoping to budget it for next year. But our insurance, which is some of the best insurance through the company we have that you can legally still own. In fact, the Affordable Care Act that Obama signed made our old insurance illegal. We had one of those gold parachute insurances that only the CEOs got, but our company gave it to everybody back then. It's like $170 retail per month for the sensor, not the advanced one. And ours only covered like half, and so it was going to be like $75. And I just don't have that in my budget right now. But my father's been able to leverage this and see how different types of food, because everybody says for diabetics, carbs are bad, right? Generic, carbs bad. Stay away from them. But he's been able to adjust what carbs are bad and what
Mm-hmm.
types of bread are bad and what types of bread from here are bad and this. And then he did an experiment, which I didn't believe, but he read it somewhere in a diabetic forum or diabetic website where it said, cook your pasta that you want to eat the night before and then refrigerate it for at least 24 hours, and you will get 50% or less sugars into your body afterward. And so he did. He cooked some, ate it. Sugar went up to like 125, 150 or whatever. Refrigerated it, ate the same pasta, and ate triple the amount, and his sugar went up to like 65.
Yeah, that makes
So,
Wow.
sense because once you're
yeah.
cooling off
Mm-hmm.
the gluten molecule, I would assume you're making it less bioavailable. So that, I mean, that
Yeah, there's
makes
chemistry happening.
sense. Yeah.
But I want one of these sensors. And what I don't understand is if we want to be healthy, if that's our goal, if we say that as the government and we say that as insurance, and we now have a monitoring device that can live monitor our sugars, and we know, at least for people who are diabetic, why isn't this being covered 100%? because it's a lot cheaper than
There's the big question.
it's a lot cheaper than the treatments and stuff, like if your foot gets infected or losing hands and toes and all those things that come down the line. And if I can monitor my sugars, I don't need as much meds, right? And I'm on, I don't mind saying, I'm on metformin, which is kind of like a magic drug. It does a lot of really good stuff compared to a lot of the other diabetic stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I know my food's trying to kill me, but I don't have any good way to measure it. And the other problem is, like right now, I'm paycheck to paycheck. Eating healthy in America is expensive.
Yeah. But it's different than you think. Like, for instance, your drink, your soda. You're spending a lot of money on soda in the first place. But there's a lot of stuff in there. There's the aspartame, like you said, which, by the way, over an extended period of time of consumption, aspartame mimics diseases. Diabetes is number one on the list. Alzheimer's, Epstein-Barr, Guillain-Barré, or whatever that one is. Tons of them. So the consumption of it can mimic, it can cause the disease itself, but it can mimic it. So the symptoms, you present these symptoms to your doctor and he goes, oh, you've got diabetes and your blood sugar shows it. When all the whole time that aspartame is in there, doing this to you, doing this to your cells.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you on that. The other part of that is, we also know diabetes is genetic, and it's been in my family line for a while, so I'm predisposed.
Yeah.
But if I change my diet,
is it genetic because 3 generations ago we introduced the sugar into the genetic line, and it's actually modified the way that the genetics in your family handle those sugars?
We had people. Now they weren't diagnosed diabetic because they didn't know what it was, but we had people with the diabetic symptoms in the 1880s and the 1890s in the family. I mean, it is a trait that follows along.
Then you were doomed from the beginning.
Yeah. And now that's not to dismiss the fact that my bad eating habits didn't make it worse, right?
Yeah.
And if I change my diet.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's not necessarily that you had bad eating habits. It's that you can eat as bad as you want the food that we all grew up on. Because back then it was just the food, it was just junk food. Mm-hmm. Now it's been so poisoned that even if you have diabetes as genetic, it's in your genes, you can eat so much of this stuff and it will trigger it. It will bring the disease on and you will have it. And I don't know if that's by design or I don't know why they're putting all this stuff in our food, but it's there.
So I'm fascinated by some of this. Go ahead, Daniel. Go ahead.
I don't know if it's by design, but I definitely know, and I've mentioned this. I don't think I've mentioned this before on here, but we know because it's been brought up a lot that the food pyramid was bought and paid for by the sugar industry, and so we have to start from everything they taught us in school was a lie from the beginning. So we've been treating our food and looking at it wrong from the beginning.
Right.
And there's another historical aspect to this. During World War II, the food industry needed to find a way to pack highly preservative, highly not break down, high calorie superfoods. And I think in those people's minds, they were trying to do something better. And so we got, quote unquote, processed food, right? Now, that doesn't mean that at some point somebody may not have done something else.
Yeah,
right?
So you need to go read Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss, and he really dives into the beginning of this whole process. And he really dives into it actually with the Lunchable. Like he really breaks down how the Lunchable, the Lunchable originally came with a napkin.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Yeah, it came with a napkin when they first came out.
And it came with like a mayonnaise packet and a mustard packet.
Some of them would, So, but they started with processed cheese and crackers and meat, and it was and he really dives into the whole thing about cheese, how much we put cheese on everything now, because the reason we put cheese on things is because we have a surplus of milk because we subsidize the dairy farmers.
Well, and we had government cheese for a while where the government was buying cheese and it
apparently
was a
there are
for old people.
caves.
There are caves that are full of cheese
somewhere. Yeah.
Now, I watched a special on this,
Yeah.
ironically, like 2 weeks ago, like a YouTube special, and a lot of that surplus has been handed out and now is not there. But the
Yes, but
subsidies
the
there,
cheese
and
industry is gigantic
oh, it's
now.
monstrous. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, the other thing I think is interesting is, and I keep coming back to this, World War II changed everything in America,
Yeah.
everything about how we do things, everything how our economy worked globally. And it also introduced people to foods they've never had before.
hmm
And it gave people this idea for a diet, and I want this. And as crazy as this sounds, because if you were to tell an Italian this, they would kill you. Chef Boyardee gave America a taste for Italian food, right? That nasty Chef Boyardee stuff that I crave whenever I'm stressed out. That you pour the spaghetti and meatballs with that bad sauce.
It's not as bad as you think.
Yeah, well, but if you go up to an Italian and tell them that that's spaghetti and meatballs, they will probably
Mhm.
stab you with a fork, right? Um, that gave America an idea that was different than the home cooked meal, right? And then I remember growing up, and Daniel, you're probably too young to remember this, the foil bottom and foil covered TV dinner. That was
Yeah, no,
dying. That was dying. That was a
Mhm.
60s and the 70s and early 80s thing. And then they went to
Yeah.
microwavable TV dinners, but they used to have to be cooked
Right.
in the oven. Um, and so like these quick type foods, I mean, that's what's driven my life. And between being a single dad and all this, it's like I don't have time. And you've joked
Well,
with
and
me,
then
Daniel, like,
more,
oh, you're learning
that
how
was
to
to
cook.
supplement the removal of the second parent from the home.
Hmm.
You know, once we moved to two income households, you didn't have time to cook a meal.
Yeah.
You had to do it quick, and so then that's where you get shake and bake and all those sort of beginning
Hamburger
of the things
helper.
where
Yeah.
where we're like, well, you've got a good meat, and now just throw all this other garbage in there with it, and then you'll have a meal. And then what happened is, and I'm sure at the beginning, hamburger helper was probably not that bad for you.
It
It was
wasn't
probably
bad.
a bunch, that was also probably when you had to add your own milk, and
Mhm.
you had to add a couple things to it. And
And you still
now it's
do.
just dumping it.
You
Some
still
of them.
do for
Sometimes
some
you
of
can
them.
just dump it in a box and add water, and then you get
Yes.
pancakes. Like,
Yeah. Or and again, and we also get to this. Okay, so what's good and what's not? I mean, if we dehydrate certain foods, that's not necessarily bad, right? But we got to look at the ingredient list and see what all's in there.
yeah,
That's
and we're
Sorry,
ahead.
I was going to say the thing about the ingredients list is not just what's on the label. So, like all the
Mhm.
dough conditioners, all those guys are in the flour. But as long as they list flour in the ingredients, you don't know that it has all that stuff in
Mhm.
it. So, all these popular sub chains that have all like four of them, I think. Well, I probably can't say it, but four of them in one of the major ones.
Mhm.
Why do you need that much to puff your bread up? Because you're eating that, you're thinking, oh, my
Mhm.
gut is bloated because I just had all this bread. I got to go to gluten-free bread or whatever. When all you have to do is not eat that bread because it has a yoga mat in it. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. It's like
You
the
know,
whole
I don't
gluten
know.
allergy thing. Nobody
Yeah.
had it. Now, I'm not to say someone's not allergic to gluten, but because I'm sure there
right.
are people who are, but this wasn't a thing for most of my life, right?
Well,
Exactly.
I'm still on the idea that a lot of these allergies, like peanuts and melons and a lot of these things that are popping up out of nowhere, I heard someone talking about the idea that our immune systems are in overdrive because we're not dealing with any of the other things that our bodies used to have to deal with. The crap was that were in the water, the things that were in the food that you ate. Like we've moved from the dark ages, and even before then, when it was, when everything's so clean now. All that's left
Mhm.
is like, oh, when you used to eat a peanut, you would get like itchy. Yeah, it's not a thing anymore. Now your face expands, and
Or
you,
you
because
die.
Yeah.
there's nothing left
To
for
be
your
to be
body
quite
to
serious,
react
because
to.
I used to have a coworker who passed away a couple of years ago, and it wasn't from
Not from
this.
that.
But if you
Oh,
brought
gosh.
peanuts anywhere within 50
Yeah.
yards of her, she knew and
Yeah.
she would freak out because she had that lethal level of the peanut allergy.
Yeah, it's a
So,
thing for sure. And it's
But
like
it
you
was
said,
never this crazy.
well, and that's also because there's a lot more people. But oh gosh, what were you saying? You were just saying about the bread. Oh, I was going to tell you about, like, if you're in Europe or whatever, you go and buy your bread for the day. You come home,
Mhm.
you eat it. If you don't, it's stale and you can't use it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we've got bread in the grocery stores that'll stay there for months. I don't even
my
know how long.
my favorite example is somebody did like the time lapse photo of the McDonald's hamburger that didn't rot for 5 years.
Yes.
Well, there is apparently a McDonald's hamburger in a Tupperware from something like the 80s that still is
No, somebody just set
together.
one out and started. And
Well, no, I know,
one,
but like somebody
nothing
put one in a
ate it
Tupperware
in
and
the
closed it up,
woods.
and it's
You know, that's telling right there. Wildlife wouldn't touch it, and it didn't rot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have stopped going to most fast food places. I will go to a couple of them, but I specifically McDonald's. I stopped at
They
one
use a
the
lot of
other
sugar.
day. What
Mhm.
it's not. I don't think it's that. I think it's whatever they put in their meat to preserve it. I got
That too.
so sick for four. It felt like food poisoning for 4 or 5 days with all the stuff that came from food poisoning. And I thought maybe I just got a bad burger, right? Because that could happen. And
That
then
happens.
like 4 or 5 months later, I ate another one of the burgers and I got that sick again. And so I will not. There's a couple of things I can eat there off their breakfast menu, but any of their other stuff I won't touch at all.
Yeah.
Um,
That's,
Well,
unfortunately, that's how
you have
I've
to wonder
discovered all
how.
these things. I'm
mhm.
sorry, Dan.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's how all your reactions to things are how I've discovered everything that I found is because I've eaten it and I'm so sensitive to all that crap that I would have these bad reactions and get so sick, and like you said, sometimes it was 4 and 5 days before it comes out of you. And I
Mhm.
started Googling the stuff, like the stuff they put in cheese now, so it doesn't, or not now, it's been there for a long time, but you have to shred your own cheese, and who has time for that? Unless you go to Whole
Mhm.
Foods, and who has money for that? It's like, can't I just get
Yeah,
some cheese?
the stuff that they powder the shredded cheese with is like
It's
it's
an
not.
anti-molding agent.
Yeah, but it's some sort of weird like they're
Mhm.
putting a thing on your cheese so it doesn't clump either. It keeps
I'll
it
give,
from sticking
I'll give you
together.
another
So
example of. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Go
in
ahead.
your gut, the way that it's called natamycin when you consume it, the way that it works in your gut over a period of time and all these processes that happen is it promotes candida, which is yeast, which also promotes. I'm sure you have wives, you know all the things that can
Mhm.
cause. It can cause depression. It can cause tons of stuff. And all you're doing is eating cheese from the store, and now you have all these problems. It's
Well,
like,
it's
thanks.
margarine is
Oh
is
yeah,
a like
bad.
an oil byproduct that they were trying to use it to fatten up turkeys, but it kept killing the turkeys, so they gave it to people instead
People, because
because
we
we
have
wouldn't
enough weight
die.
to not kill
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
to not kill us
Um,
when we eat it.
and
Yeah,
it's like
and
one
that was the
chemical
healthy
away,
thing.
and it's like one or two chemicals away from something you can put in your gas tank
Yeah,
or run
Yeah,
that's
oil
how
through your
all this
car.
stuff is. And
yeah.
like, if you're gonna eat something, the real thing is the best way to go. You know, like real butter. I know it's fattening, but it's better for you than putting the stuff turkeys can die from. It's
Well, and
like
how
you gotta
often
just
have they gone back and forth on cholesterol and fats and this and that? There's no, I mean, the science behind it is constantly changing. So it's like
you're right.
watching a ping pong ball game. I want to give you an example, and Daniel, I think I've told you this. Several years ago, both my parents were diagnosed with very high cholesterol. And that was about the time we did our last big fishing trip. And when I say fishing trip, we go for 2 weeks and we don't like sit there with a rod and reel. We run trot lines and we pull catfish. And in 12 days, we pulled in 800 pounds of packed filleted catfish. And then we froze it. So they ate the catfish, and we also stopped buying beef because we hunt. My dad is part of a game management program. So we have freezers full of venison. So they started eating the catfish and they started eating the venison. And that's all the meat that they ate for like 3 years. And their cholesterol dropped by three
Went
quarters.
down. Yeah.
And I don't buy beef anymore. I kill deer every year. I kill at least one deer and put it in the freezer, and that's my red meat. I still buy
We
poultry. I still
have
buy that kind
beef,
of stuff.
but we get our beef from a like a place, like we get a big order,
Like a
like
butcher.
yeah, and then we actually
Well,
got some elk this year that was good too. I wanted to comment on something you said before about the back and forth and
mhm.
everything. Um, I think there's a couple of things that keep happening with the like cholesterol's good and cholesterol's bad and carbs are good and carbs are bad and sugar this and sugar. I think
Yeah.
part of the problem is we've got two things going on. One is we need to understand how the system of the body works, and two, we need to understand that everybody's different because some people need to be vegan. That's what their body needs. They don't need all that other stuff, and some people need to be in on a carnivore diet and they need to be eating basically just meat and maybe some vegetables and some fruit and stuff, and two people can both eat completely differently and both be the healthiest way that they can eat for their body type. And I think we're trying to put everybody under one
In the
thing.
same, yeah, you're
And
absolutely
so what
right. Same
happens
with
is
working
we
out
put
and
all
exercise.
yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought, Dan.
No, that's where I
no,
was
that's
done.
that's good. It's in and the less process we can get, the better, right?
Yes.
And we run into a couple of problems. And as a country, this is a problem. We're throwing away tons of food uneaten every year,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Most of it's probably crap food, but some of it's not. Um, Getting good fresh vegetables. We're lucky. We are in Texas and we have HEB, which is one of the better
Hmm.
grocery stores about trying to get, a farm to fresh. But it's Danny, you're talking about buying from a butcher. I've got people in my family in the cattle industry, and I know all the stuff we shoot those cows up with to fatten them
Hmm.
up and feed them
Hmm.
up and the hormones and half of it's medication to make sure they don't get sick. Other stuff it is to get them fat and fed. And if you knew what cattle ate when there was a drought, people wouldn't buy beef. Do any of y'all know what the backup food when we can't get hay or we can't get corn is?
I'm afraid to know.
I think I know, but I'm not gonna guess.
I
It's
know. Isn't it
chicken
something really
litter.
gross?
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
dried chicken litter. And that sounds disgusting, but a chicken only processes like 12 to 20% or somewhere in there of the corn and stuff that it takes in. And of course, they're not scooping it up wet, right? It goes through a drying process and all that. But I have dumped hundreds of pounds of dried chicken litter into cattle troughs that the
Hmm.
cows then ate, and then we sent those cows off to market, you
Yeah.
know? And the cow's not designed to be eating chicken litter. Its body's not designed to do that. It
Yeah.
should be eating grasses and other things like that.
Grass and hay.
This is why we need Joel Salatin and we need, regenerative farming and get back to the idea of
Hmm.
of getting away from monocropping.
Mhm.
And but we've got
Or
this idea that the by only eating vegetables, I'm saving lives of animals, and it's just like some of them, but not all of them. Like it depends on which ones you want to save. Like if you're not going to eat the cow, but you're going to kill the bunny and the gopher and all the bugs and the things and the birds that get caught up in the combine things, and you're killing a lot of other animals. So
well,
it's
and
Well,
that
even
billboard with the how cute are you going to eat the on the timeline, and I'm like, well,
yep.
all the way up to the dog, I'm there. Like,
And even planting the plants, you're disrupting
yes.
the earth, and there's things that live there, skunks and
Hmm.
everything,
Yeah.
like you said, bunnies. It's like everything. It's a food chain.
and
Yeah.
there's
And
also
nature is metal.
Yeah.
there's also a much better way for us to agro farm.
Yes.
Disney proved this decades ago. I don't know if either of y'all have been through the exhibit in Disney World. Disney, for all of its parks in Florida, grows all of its vegetables in like a 2 acre spot inside, and they provide all their own vegetables.
Isn't it hydroponic?
It's all hydroponic, advanced
Yeah.
hydroponic research, and it's in Epcot, and it's amazing to tour it. Some of the vegetables don't even get planted. They're on a conveyor that go through like a misting system that give them the minerals and stuff they need. And because they're hung,
Scary.
like the zucchinis and stuff actually grow bigger and longer. They are able to do something like lettuce, something as simple as lettuce, which takes acreage of farm, right? Acres and acres and acres of farm. Well, they planted each individual head of lettuce in its own small pot and built it on this big triangle system. And in like something the size of an end zone on a football field, they've got the equivalent of like 50 acres of lettuce growing because they're going up and they're changing the spacing. And now we could argue whether those vegetables are better or good or what, but they're feeding hundreds of thousands of people in like it's like 3 to 5
No
acres,
space.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
which
So it
completely
can be
changes.
done.
Yes,
So why aren't we doing it? Is the
Be-
question.
because it's not profitable
Exactly.
It's not profitable for us to buy
for
good.
the
It's for everything. For the medical industry, it's not profitable.
the
For the food
whole
industry, it's not
economic system.
profitable.
It would put, let me just put it this way, it would put John Deere out of business.
Well, yeah.
Wow.
Think about that. Just
That's a thought.
you know, it would put
Yep.
your mega tractors out of business. The other thing it would do, and this is getting to be less of a deal because big AgroCorp is a thing, would put all your small farmers out of business, right? Now, I think there's a market for small farms, and I think people want to get back to it. But the other thing we have to blame for this is our HOAs. I can't, well, I can because I live in a place without an HOA. But in my old place that I lived in Austin, when I lived there in the Brushy Creek area, I could not convert my front yard into a garden. I could not plant my own because there's that home gardening movement if you've got the time, which would be great. Grow some of your own stuff. But like the HOA I used to be in was so strict that if you were to put out potted tomato plants, they'd fine you if it was in the
I can
front.
believe it.
You know, whereas
That
if
brings
everybody
critters,
in
and we can't have
America,
those.
if everybody in America grew like 5 vegetables, we could offset a massive amount of this stuff, and it doesn't take a lot of space.
Well, I mean, imagine if everyone in your neighborhood took a square plot of their front yard and grew a vegetable. So I'll grow lettuce and you grow green beans, and then people just shared, and you'd have so much extra stuff. But we don't want to do that for some reason. Well, nobody
like-
who has the time.
Kind of like the
that's-
olden days when you used to bring your stuff down to the market and you'd go down there and buy all the stuff like a farmer's market. And then
Right.
they got away from that because they went, hey, I can make money on that. I'll open my own market. And those people, I'll, see how it goes.
Well, and another
Yeah.
thing to think about is up until World War II, roughly, community markets or community gardens were a thing, right?
Yeah.
Backyard gardens were a thing. Most people planted something and then they canned it and sealed it and did the canning's a lost art.
Victory Gardens was a big thing in World War II, and I
In
and I
England,
wonder if
not
what
so much
happened.
here, but it
It
was more
happened.
in
It
England.
did happen here as well. I mean, there was a push for that in the U.S. as well. But I wonder if when World War II ended, if it was more of like I'm not doing that anymore,
Yeah.
and it just
Or
and
I
it
don't
just sort of
have to.
stopped. I
Or
don't have
I
to,
don't
so now
have
I can
to.
go to the yeah.
Yeah, the rise of the supermarket as opposed to the market, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Take away from the locals, make it a big chain, like with all the, even like restaurants. You take a restaurant like Chick-fil-A that used to be just in the mall back in the
Yeah.
olden days. Now, I mean, look at them. The same with markets. Used to be little small farmers markets from in your little town that you knew everybody in. You all went to the same church. You went to your market. You got your food. You knew where it was coming from, who grew it, all that stuff. No one, I mean, you did have diseases and people were sick, of course, for other reasons, but nowadays there's so much stuff in your food, it's not really even considered food. And you got to
Well, I
just get
think
back to eating what you know is clean.
Mhm. I wonder if part of that, because of the shift to the supermarket, because you're going from serving, I need 20 heads of lettuce for the 20 families in my area. Now I've got to buy 700 heads of lettuce and hope I sell them all before they go bad, because I'm trying to, once you get into scale, it starts to get different. So at that point, I can see where the supermarket would be pushing for, we need more and more things that we can buy, shelf stable stuff. I can buy it and I can leave it on the shelf, and I'm not going to lose money when it goes bad.
Yep.
And I think we're starting to see a move back to more holistic foods, right? At least people are wanting it, which is why like the prepackaged box meals that advertise that kind of thing are becoming more and more popular. And if you can afford it, I don't know how people can, but I'll give you a
I don't
specific
either.
example. And Daniel, I've given you some of these. My parents decided to start keeping like a half a dozen chickens in the backyard, and the rise of like keeping chickens to get your own fresh eggs. The quality and taste of that egg
Oh,
compared
yeah.
to a store-bought egg,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
they don't look the same. They're not the same color. They don't taste anything the same.
Nope.
And eggs are a huge part of my diet now, or they should be. I'm moving back to it. We we went through a phase where we lost a bunch of chickens for a variety of reasons, and so we've had to get them back to laying again. They were laying the like little dime-sized eggs for a little while. But there have been laws passed, like in Texas, where an HOA can't tell you can't have chickens anymore, right?
Oh, yeah.
They can tell you can't have a rooster, which we all
That's
understand.
fair.
And they can tell you have to keep them in the backyard, but now if you've got, and they don't take much space, and chickens are pretty self-sufficient. And as long as you
Yeah.
don't have like neighborhood cats running around, then you're probably okay. If you have cats, then you're going to want to put your chickens up at night, because pound for pound, the domestic cat is the most prolific hunting animal on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, getting a couple of chickens, and let me tell you, the feed for the chicken is not much more than what it costs to buy the eggs, especially if you've seen egg prices lately.
They're going
Oh,
down.
yeah.
Are they?
Are they?
Well,
They're starting to go back down again. Yeah. Well, they had to kill like a whole bunch of chickens. That's what happened.
they
Like,
had to
there were-
kill roughly half the poultry in the U.S. because of the
Yeah,
avian
there was something going
diseases.
through. Which again, that's a problem, because we're keeping thousands and thousands of chickens together in a room. And if we were
Right.
doing things like, where you had, you got 40, 50 chickens and they're out in there, like Salatin does. He's got them in little sections and he moves them
Yeah.
around and he keeps them isolated, and they're not a problem. You don't have to
We-
worry about that kind of stuff.
We haven't even talked about the eugenics of raising animals yet.
Oh, yeah.
Like the modern turkey, the modern farm
Oh, yeah.
turkey has to be inseminated artificially, because the turkey breasts are so big they can't mate. They can't have
I
sex.
did not know that.
Yes. And all you have to do is go look at a normal turkey out in the wild.
Yeah.
They don't have these
Oh, yeah, they don't look
monstrous
anything.
breasts, But yeah, the breasts on farm turkeys are so large now, they can't physically get close enough together to have sex.
So that means we shouldn't be using them anymore. We've broken the turkey.
We have. Well, and how much dark meat's on a modern turkey or on a modern chicken? Used to be like 3/4 dark meat. And, I mean, and we have turkey on my parents' place. We watch them. We don't hunt them because we like having them out there. They're just neat to watch. But they're an eighth to a third of the size of a farm-raised turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And I also
We
have
turkeys out. We live on a farm, so we got turkeys and everything out here.
Mhm.
It's a different way of life when you see how things work. Like you're talking about the cattle and
Yes.
how they run, how they work, and how it all goes is just so different. And then when you understand all the things in the food and you see it being produced out here and you make your own, it's just you see how bad it all is, and you just wonder. So it's, well, like I said, you just need to start eating clean. Like if you think it's bad for you, it probably is. Your diet, I know your drinks are good, but start getting hooked on like seltzer water. I mean, they have those good flavored ones
Yeah,
now, and those are
and
so much better.
again, like I said, this is a stress drink for me, right? This is what I go to when I'm stressed out.
Hmm.
And there have been points where I have been like, look, I'm just going to drink water. And if I can get on a water kick and go for 3 or 4 months, I feel so much better, and I know I feel better, but it's the lack of discipline, it's the lack of that is kicking
Yeah.
in.
It's easy
Um,
Well,
to do that. It's easy to just go to the comfort zone.
Michael Moss gets in on his other book, Hooked. He gets into he talks a lot about, he actually goes into great detail in that system about how your tongue and your esophagus and your stomach are actually one organ system. And so that the foods that touch your tongue actually cause your stomach to do different things. And
Hmm.
so what he gets into in that is that the worst thing that you can, because go through the whole book and I'm waiting for him to get to the end and go like, and here's what the answer is. And he gets to the end and goes, there's no answer. Everybody's different. But the one thing I can tell you is don't drink calories.
Right.
yes.
Period. Like if these juice, soda, you know, frappuccinos, anything that you're drinking that's full of sugar and calories, the moment it hits your tongue, it tells your stomach, sugar's coming, food's coming, get ready, there's a thing. And then the liquid gets there and your stomach goes, what the hell is this? This is not what you told me was coming. And then that's why all of a sudden now I'm hungry and I need food, is because your stomach is going, I've got all these enzymes ready to process this and there's nothing here. So it's
Yeah.
triggering you to want more stuff.
And then I look at some of these people who we say are like health nuts and gym rats and stuff. And so much of their diet is powdered stuff mixed with water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
and like the whey protein and how to get the proteins in and that kind of stuff. And right now I'm doing an experiment because my sugar went up a little bit, and to be fair, I got sick in February. I felt like crap, and so I've been eating really bad, which is part of why my sugars are up. I also haven't been exercising. I've been exercising regularly since I caught COVID, and I need to get back into that. But I picked up some diabetic specific like breakfast drinks, and they're very small. They're like 8 ounces, and they're super high protein. They don't really have sugar in them, but like they've got some real dark chocolate mixed in, and that's where the sugars come from. And it's not a lot, just enough to give it like a flavor. And so I've been trying that. I'm going to try that and see if it helps. But I know what I really need to go back to is like just two scrambled eggs or two boiled eggs
Yeah.
in the morning,
And a
and
cup of coffee.
and
Protein.
not even that. I've gotten away from
Yeah.
caffeine. I really have.
It's good.
Oh, have you?
Caffeine is actually not bad for you if you handle it properly.
Yeah, in
You
high
don't drink it
doses
too.
it is, but not minimal. Like a cup a day, you're fine.
Well,
Yeah, and you also
I've
need to
shifted to
wait.
tea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but I've shifted to like hot teas, like a green tea or an orange tea or something like that, as opposed to coffee. And I'll still have the occasional cup, but once I got off coffee, I've noticed I can't really drink more than 1 cup.
Yeah.
That,
You shouldn't really be drinking that much coffee every day. Um, I can't. Matthew Walsh. That's not right. It's Matthew something
no,
with
he
a
does
W. Yeah, it's
the
not that Matt. It's a different Matt. But he talks a lot about sleep. He talks about how how long the half life of coffee is. And that if you're drinking a cup of coffee in the anytime after like 12 o'clock, you still have essentially a half a cup of coffee in you when you're trying to go to sleep at night. Like
Yeah.
that's basically where you're at caffeine wise. So he says let it go. Huberman talked about how you need to wait an hour to an hour and a half to let the adenosine drain out of your system. That takes care of the afternoon sleep, the sleepiness. But I mean, it's not terrible for you. But they say the best thing for you in the morning is 8 to 16 ounces of cold water.
Hmm.
It just fires everything up in your system,
Flushes you out,
and
gets
it
everything
flushes you
started
out.
up again.
Yeah,
you know what's
and you
funny
jump
about that?
by putting the cold in, by putting cold water in you. It's the same thing as with the cold shower thing in the morning. Like it makes your system go, that's cold, I need to warm up, and it makes your engine turn on.
It's
So
more a
for
little
faster.
two for a
adrenal spark.
Mm-hmm.
190,000 years, the first thing we did was get up and walk over to the water source and drink as much cold water as we
Mhm.
could
As we
to
could.
fill up our
Mhm.
stomach until we found something to eat. I wonder why
Yeah.
drinking cold water is good for us. You
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
That and looking at the sun in the morning too. That's the other one. Huberman talks about that all the time. He says the most important thing that you can do in the morning is about 20 minutes of direct sunlight into your eyes. He says take off your sunglasses. 20
Make it
minutes of
like
direct
think of it
sunlight.
going right here.
Yeah. He says that almost every cell in your body has some sort of thing that essentially all the cells in your body, based on the sunlight hitting your eyes, it just turns they're all like, it's morning, and they all sort of turn on at the same time, and you're not out of sync. I think that was the idea, is that if you don't get that sunlight early in the morning, that like one system turns on and then the next one turns on later, and your body's sort of all out of sync the whole day.
and then we need the vitamin D because, you and I both work
Mhm.
from home, and there are days where, especially in the wintertime, where I'm not outside when the sun's out.
Right.
And so I started taking vitamin D and vitamin B. And that has been one of the most world changing things in my life. Nothing special, no crazy multivitamins, just the super B complex. And to me, that's better than coffee as far as waking
Mhm.
me up. But, I take 2 of the 5,000 AU or whatever it is, vitamin
IU.
Ds,
Yeah.
or 2 of the
5,000
5,000 IU,
IU.
the liquid gel vitamin Ds, and man, I feel so much better.
Yeah.
My skin is healthier, my energy level's better, I'm sleeping better, and I'm not going to be able to get outside most days.
Yeah.
Even if I start driving back into work 3 days a week, which I'm probably going to be starting to do soon. But
Statistically, they're saying that most Americans are vitamin D deficient,
Yeah.
and so we should and coincidentally, vitamin D deficiency is linked to catching COVID and having really bad reactions to it. So why we're not pushing vitamin D, who knows? But you should take it. Vitamin D
But
is really good
also,
for you.
like people like me, redheads, we make our own because we have fair skin, so we can't go out in the sun that much. So
Right.
that's, again, it's use your own body to judge what you need and what makes you feel better, and you use it as a guide. Yeah, vitamin D is good, but if you start to feel bad because you started taking it, well, then stop taking it and find something
Right.
else. It's
Yeah.
like everybody's different, but I don't know what I was going to say after that.
Yeah. No,
No,
well,
you're
and
right.
Train of thought.
Everybody is different, and
It's
now
just-
we're finding
you
our
have
genetic makeups are different, and
Yeah.
at a much deeper level than we thought. I don't know if Daniel's told you this, but like I'm Neanderthal, right? I'm hybrid. I fall in that group. I did the genetic test, and I have more Neanderthal DNA than 95% of the people who did it in the 23andMe, which is just amazing.
now it's
And
only like
Wow.
3%.
it's
but
between 3 and 4% of my
Yeah.
DNA. We found out Leslie, your wife, is Neanderthal,
It was
and
like
I've got it coming from
2.
both sides.
Yeah.
Wow.
But here's what's really interesting: she's only 2 or 3 of the things smaller than I am, or less than what I have, and that drops her down into like a 45%.
Yeah.
You know,
They've
so-
only identified so many markers.
yeah. But something as simple as this, the hitchhiker's thumb. If you can do this, you have Neanderthal DNA. This is a Neanderthal trait.
this is
people
also
who-
this is
This?
Yes.
hitchhiker's thumb. This is
a
a
Neanderthal
dominant
trait.
this is a dominant genetic trait. It runs in our family. I remember this from middle school. I figured that we had to do this project. Hitchhiker's thumb runs in our family, which means which means it's from that line, from the
They
paternal
also
line.
think that redheads come from Neanderthal because they've
Oh, I
found the
believe that.
redhead gene in Neanderthals spread across the world, not just in the northern reaches where
Yeah.
Homo sapiens tend to develop it over time. So that was a
And
fascinating
all the
test.
and we're all completely off food, and I'm going to jump back to it. But all the redheads,
Well-
all the giants were redheads too. Like,
Yeah,
let's just
but
throw
no,
that
no.
out there.
What all I meant by that
Oh
is
my
our
God.
genetic makeups are more complicated than we thought we were.
Yes.
And
Well, I was going to
You
say,
know,
if you have Neanderthal, it's no wonder why your family does hunting and eats it, everything that you make, your chickens and your everything on your land. That's
yeah.
hunting.
I think that's baked into everybody though.
I
Like
was gonna say
we've been
Yes.
I'm a good old fashioned, good old boy Texas redneck. Okay, that's where that comes from. Um, but my family kept those traditions going a
Right.
long
But see,
time,
like
and
I'm from Texas too, but I don't have that. I mean, I do now because we live out here, but before that, I was a city girl and I had no hunter gatherer or anything.
and
So I
that's
I'll,
don't
that's
know
our
if it's
that's actually I can tell you what that's our grandfather's fault because well
yeah.
my dad he went hunting one time, did not like it at all, was complete, and then just never did that again. And so then it didn't get passed
It
down
didn't
to
get
our
passed
parents, and it
on.
didn't. That's how it ended.
yeah,
So
and whereas my family had one foot in the city and one on both sides, one foot in the city and one foot in the ranch. And so, my dad's side of the family had people in the cattle industry. My mom's side of the family did, and every other weekend. I mean, I grew up in Houston. I grew up in the suburbs. I'm from Cypress, right? But every other weekend and like half the summer, I was on a cattle ranch running cattle and helping out
That's
and doing
cool.
that kind of stuff. And no, we didn't use horses. We didn't do any of that kind of stuff. So I couldn't ride a horse to save my life. But hunting's hunting, fishing, those were just things we did. And everybody in the family did. And that's where we gathered. Our
Hmm.
vacations were around a creek or a river,
yeah.
or we would
Well,
go up over Thanksgiving and we would hunt. So
and that's what we've lost. We've lost that connection to our food in that way. Like it used to be. I mean, like so Leslie's family does this. Her family, they are big hunters, and so we'll get invited to come help where like, they're making sausage. And it's all day. The whole family gets together and they make 600 pounds of sausage. Like
Oh
it's
my
just what
God.
they do. And they do it once a year and you get together, and then when you leave, you get to take a little bit with you. Like you go and help and
and
you
you
get
freeze it
some.
and
But
you eat
like
on it all year.
and
Yeah.
but you also then you were part of that process. We've talked
Yeah.
about this before. The first time I went hunting
Yeah, tell that
was a
story because that hasn't
profound
been told
experience for
here.
me. Well, so I it was not something I'd ever done before, and so you took me out, and we went and I shot a deer. It
I didn't
was
know
it
Bill
was
was the hunter
yes,
taker.
Bill is the impetus of this thing,
Okay, I
You were
got you.
actually
and
sitting
so
with my dad. My
I
dad
was
took,
sitting with your
yeah,
dad,
yeah.
and we shot the deer. We went and got it. We took it back. We dressed it down. We cut it all up, and then I took it home. And we didn't really process it down any more than
We
especially just
quartered
like
it out.
big
I think
big recorded it out.
yeah.
And then I took it home and very badly processed it down farther, and then cooked it up and we ate it. And I had sort of this sort of profound moment the first time I ate something like that, which was like, oh, I did all of this. I shot it and cooked it and cut, and I did the whole thing, and now I eat it, and you're like, I understand now. Like
Hmm.
you get to see the whole circle, and you go, okay. And I don't think I was ever food doesn't meat doesn't come from the supermarket. I always understood like the meat comes from the cow. You have to kill the cow to get the food. But there are people who don't have that
Yeah,
connection.
there are people in denial. I used to have a manager at work who said,
Hmm.
"Don't tell me how it happens. It grows on a beef tree in styrofoam packets.
Yeah. And
Don't
I
tell me
was
otherwise, or I won't be able to eat it, and I'll
Oh my
hate you if you
God.
ever do that to me." Because for
and
people
I
who
was
don't
very
know, the way they
I was
kill
really
cattle,
clear with my kids early on of like, you know, we're gonna have a hamburger. That's a cow. Like,
so
I want you
yeah,
to understand what that is so that
Yeah,
and if you decide I don't want to do that, spectacular. That
and
is your decision to decide what you are and aren't going to eat. But you don't get to lie to yourself about what it is so that you get to eat it. Like
exactly.
that's
and
Yeah,
we're not gonna play that game.
yeah.
and I'm not beating up on my family because they still do as much as they can free range cattle, or they did. My grandfather's the one. My grandparents are the ones who ran cattle, and they're not doing it anymore. And I have my cousin's husband is still running some, but I don't know exactly. I'm not involved with the process. But the way the cattle industry generally works, and I'm not a big fan of it, which is one of the reasons I hunt, so I don't have to buy beef. Or if I buy beef, I go buy a cow from somebody I know where the cow is. I've seen the cow before it died. I've seen the cow.
Mhm.
But the cattle industry takes cattle and then they put them in what they call a feed lot. And it is
We have one of
inhumane.
those up here.
And they shove as many of them as they can in and just shove food. And the methane produced from that can be so bad that there have been cars that have caused explosions off of the methane clouds that have come off of feedlots, right? That's not an urban myth. It's actually happened. And then the cattle get shipped to places like Chicago or Fort Worth or wherever the slaughterhouses are, and they're put on a conveyor belt and they're run through the slaughterhouse and they have a nail gun set up.
Don't
And when
get
they get to
specific.
that part-
No, don't get specific.
But
Don't get
that's
specific.
how it's done.
Yes.
That's how it's done. It is a manufacturing style slaughterhouse. It's not like it used to be. Like if you watch an old cowboy show about a slaughterhouse where they go in and they cut the cow's throat and it bleeds out and it dies, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. That's more humane than this whole industrial thing they have going on, or what they do with like chickens in the chicken houses where they
Oh yeah.
cut their beaks off so they don't peck at each other because they're so crowded in. This super agro farming thing just makes me angry. And
It's
I'm
bad.
a hunter and I come from a farming and ranching family, and it's this big megacorp stuff. It's not good. At no level is it good.
and
No.
and it's hard to find an alternative to that.
And it's
Like, it's
expensive
not-
if you do.
Yes.
Yes.
Because-
if you want to get away from that, like, I find this abhorrent. I don't want to support this. How do I do that? You really can't. Like, there's not a good option.
The last person that we had who leased our property, and they ran cattle on it, they had an entire business that was based around just grass-fed beef, which tastes very
Mhm.
different, and it was just
Mhm.
grass-fed. It was out on that, and he would slaughter the cow and take it down to the butcher, and that's not an easy thing. Like Daniel,
No.
we processed out the deer. The deer was less than 150 pounds. It's not hard to do. It's a lot harder to do with a 3,000-pound animal, right?
Yeah.
You need
Mhm.
equipment to do that, heavy equipment to do that. But it can be done. He would sell his beef, and it had some kind of like fast mail order thing. I don't know exactly how it worked with like the freezing and everything. But people who paid him for his beef were paying 5 to 8 times the going rate per pound
Jeez.
Right.
for that beef.
Yeah.
Because it may not be as niche a market as it was. This was 12, 14, 15 years ago. But that's your alternative. Because
Yeah.
that guy had to find a place to lease that had enough water, had enough grass, that he didn't have to bring in additional food for, and those places are drying up.
So when we just built a place out here on our farm, we lease cattle, so we have them out here, and they're on our side probably 6 months. On the guy lives right next to us with his land and his cattle, and they go back over there, during the winter and eat their hay that he grew while they were over here.
Mhm.
And so the first time he harvested some of them, and he brought us one, and I don't eat meat. I don't eat it because I think it's wrong. I just don't like it. It doesn't taste good to me.
Fair enough.
So, but my husband, cooked a steak and was amazed at the taste. I mean, he's had fresh beef before, but it just was right here in our front yard, and now he's eating it, and it's just the difference is amazing.
Yeah.
And
There.
you want that
There's.
nowadays. You got to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can
And
still
that's-
get it. It's
You
just
can.
expensive.
You can still get it. You just have to. You have
pay.
to be, one,
like-
willing to find it, and two, be able to afford it, because it's not.
It's
And
just
why?
like-
It shouldn't be like that.
If you want the best burger in Texas, you go to Belton, to this little place called Crow Burgers that Daniel has been to, and they get all their beef
Best burger
locally
I've ever had.
sourced. And the shop is a 10 by 20 shack with a window,
Mm-hmm.
and there you eat in your car, or there's a couple of picnic tables outside, and the same family's owned it for 80 years, and they've got the same skillet that they've had forever that has been curing for 80 years as like one of these big cast iron giant skillet things, and
Wow.
their bread doesn't, I can go there and eat their burger and it doesn't make me sick, except for how much pepper they put on it, because it's a good Texas burger and it's soaked in black pepper,
It's
right?
so
But
good.
but Daniel didn't believe
Wow.
me that it was that good a burger until he had one, and then it was like the look on your
There
face was
there's
just
there's
not
something to
mixed.
be said for good meat. I mean, it's the same
Mm-hmm.
the first time I had raw milk, where you're like, "Oh, this is what milk tastes like." And
Yep.
then you drink the milk that you get from the store and you realize that it's full of sugar.
Yeah, and
Yep.
see, I'm
Because
trying to get my
most people don't realize that they take, like, so essentially what you get in a gallon of milk is 2 gallons of milk worth of sugar.
Mhm.
They basically dehydrate the milk down and take the lactose, which is actually the sugar, and they put it back into the other gallon. So you get a gallon of milk sugar and
Mm-hmm.
add it to the gallon that you're having, and so you get that's why it's so sweet now.
Well, and part of that is because we're also thinning it down, right? Most people don't
Hmm.
drink whole milk anymore. And I don't
Right.
know if the whole milk is better from the store than the other, but I'm trying to get my
Hmm.
oldest off of it because he's addicted to milk. Irony is my youngest is allergic to milk. He's very allergic to like dairy in general. But
Hmm.
my oldest son will go through 2 to 3 gallons of milk in a 7 day period.
I
Wow.
used to I
He will
used to do
pour
that too.
the giantest, biggest glass we have right before
Hmm.
That's
bed to
good, isn't
take
it?
his medicine. Yeah, but I'm worried about the sugar intake the same way I am with sodas at some point, right? He's
Is he
taking a
drinking whole
lot of it
milk
in.
though?
Yeah, but it's store-bought whole milk. It's not dairy because in
Oh, okay.
Texas, the only way you can buy raw milk is to go to a dairy and buy it
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and there's not one
Do you
close.
do organic
I
milk at least, or is it
Uh,
just
I buy the cheapest one at HEB that's on the WIC program, um,
okay?
or the assistance program, because milk's not cheap. You
No,
know,
it's not at all.
it costs more per gallon than gas does right now. I'm not kidding. I saw
I know
yeah.
gas
it's
for like
crazy.
2.75, and the gallon of milk was 2.79. And then the other ones, if I went to the other brands, which
Oh,
the
it
other
gets
brands, they're
five, six,
three,
$7 a
four, five.
gallon.
And you mentioned organic, and that's the other big lie that they don't. The
Mm-hmm.
term organic has no legal definition in America when it comes to the
No,
supermarket.
they could put it on there, and it doesn't mean
There's a
anything.
there's a couple other ones. Like, I think, like, cage free doesn't mean what you think it means, and like
Hmm.
there's a couple of those, and I'd have to look them up again that don't mean what.
Cage free
But
is just means that they're still confined. They're just not in their own cage, but they're
Yeah,
still
they're not in an
confined together.
individual
there's
cage.
I think
Yeah.
oh, I know it's free range
Yeah.
means they have access to an open space, which means they're in a giant thing and there's like a little paddock with a little door
Well,
that they can
and
get out to.
to be
Right.
fair, to be fair, to be fair, um, if you know it, you know it. To be fair, when it says free range, most of those animals need a place to go at night to shore up,
Yes,
right?
but when you've got a 50,000 square foot you building
Yeah, I
connected
understand
to a
what you're saying.
20 square foot paddock,
It's not free
that's not
range.
free
No,
It's not
range.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
no, it's
The other
not like
the other
cattle out there, right? That can come into
yes.
the barn when they want to, or chickens that are out all day, like in my parents' yard and
Here.
whatever.
Yeah.
That
Roaming around doing their
we
own
put
thing.
up at night.
Night they go into
Yeah.
their little house.
The other one that's real tricky is real fruit juice. If you
Oh, fruit
read
juice.
the little, you get the little apple juice container and they say 100% real fruit juice, which is true. But again, it's the same as the milk. What they don't tell you is that they reduce the fruit down to the sugar and add that sugar to the fruit juice. And so therefore it's
Yeah.
100% fruit juice. We've just added a bunch of sugar to it that we're
Yeah.
not mentioning.
But it's no sugar added because it's still real fruit.
Because it's still
Yeah,
real.
it's
Well,
because
it
it's
doesn't. It doesn't say
dehydrated
no sugar
fruit.
added. It just says 100% fruit
Yeah.
juice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all you've got
Well,
to
it's the
do is
same.
buy
Oh,
orange juice and make your own
yeah.
and to taste the
Or
difference.
or you don't make juice. You eat the orange and you get all the fiber that's in it, because that's what's good for you.
Yeah.
Which
True.
when you juice an orange and drink it, you're removing all the good stuff and just drinking the sugar water.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, seriously, because what's
Yeah,
good
you're
about the
right.
orange is, yes, the juice and the sugar are good for you when you eat them with all the fiber and the stuff
True.
that's
The way
in
they
the
all
orange
react
with
together
it.
in your body.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
same thing. When you put the sugar on your tongue, your stomach is going orange, and then the juice shows up and it goes, where's all the fiber? Where's all the
Mhm.
stuff that I need to process?
And you know what's fascinating about that is I used to have a sweet tooth, and I still kind of do, but I've had to find, since I'm diabetic, other ways to do that without going overboard. And so one of the things I've started doing, because my youngest eats it like crazy, blueberries and blackberries and raspberries, because HEB is great and we have them pretty much year round, and they're usually fairly local and fresh. Just a little bowl, and I've had to teach myself just a little bowl, and then that's my treat. That's my treat. But
Yeah.
it's whole berries, right? It's not berry flavored this, berry flavored. The other thing that I've had to
Yeah.
do, and this
Berry
has been a
flavored.
discipline thing, and my oldest son, I had to sit him down and explain to him why we were doing this. I still let them have ice cream occasionally. I still let them have those desserts. I make my 18-year-old go and scoop it out for my kids. And I don't buy anything I like. Right? I despise mint chocolate chip ice cream. It's disgusting. So that is the ice cream, 'cause both boys like it. That is the ice cream that lives at my house. So, because if
Yeah.
I go, I mean, we're in Texas, we have Bluebell. And the only ice cream that killed people and people were willing to pay $5,000 for a gallon, right? When you couldn't get it. I can't buy the double Dutch chocolate, which again, the Bluebell ice cream is probably better than a lot of the other ones. But still, if it's here, I don't have the discipline to not eat it.
Yeah.
So I'm having to try and do those things because it's I can't tell an 8-year-old you can't ever have ice cream again, right?
Well, and to talk about the discipline, I saw this pop up on my, so I got a YouTube ad. This was a while ago, and it was not long after the new year. And the ad was basically, I don't remember which pizza company was it, but it was one it's one of the big ones, one of the big three. And it was basically like, did you think you were going to give up pizza for New Year's? Why don't you just give in and order a pizza? And I was like, that is the most devious commercial I've ever seen. Like,
Yep.
just give up on your weight loss goals and buy a pizza, you fat person. Like, oh my goodness. Like, so
Yeah.
again, you talk about the self-control. The companies know we have no self-control, and they're using that in their commercials. You
Yep.
got no self-control, just get a pizza, you'll be fine.
Everyone's
and,
doing it. Just do it.
Yeah. Just do it.
And I've had to do things like, the things that I know I can do, right? And a lot of it is adjusting how much I eat and getting used to eating less, because I had trained myself for a while where, I wasn't eating a lot, so I could kind of eat whatever I wanted, but it was just a small amount. Then I got sick, and when I got sick, I started eating. Anyway, one of the things I've done with pizza, because it's such an easy meal for the kids, is the thin crust. Because I worked for the particular pizza company, and I know what they put in the dough to make it, and I've done that. And I know their thin crust is exactly the same as their hand tossed or their thick crust. They're just putting less of it in there. Now, it's prepackaged flour, pour in your water and all that, so I'm sure it's not great, right? As if I were to make pizza dough from like the raw flour that doesn't have all the junk in it. You can still do that, and the quality of, if you've got the time, the quality of the food is so much better. Like when my mom takes the time to do her homemade rolls at like Thanksgiving, where we're using the yeast and we're putting it in with the like more raw style flour, and it's an all day thing just to make the rolls. Oh my God, they're to die for.
And
I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
but
crazy thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. But the rolls are alive at that point. Like technically, the yeast is a thing. Like
Mhm.
you're
hmm
actually like doing a thing with
it's
another
an organism.
organism to create. Like
Yeah.
it's a weird sort of process that's happening there. But like when you do that, when you have this symbiotic relationship with the yeast and you do what you need, then you end up with this thing. And what we've done is gone, well, we don't want to do all of the hard stuff, so we're
We're
just
using
gonna.
chemistry instead of living things to eat now.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes,
Yes. And we're meant to eat the living things. That's why they're here.
Mhm.
yes.
That's why they were
That's
put
the
here.
whole circle of life thing. I think there was a
Yes.
Disney movie about this.
Yes. I don't
There's a
know what it's
book.
called though, huh?
Yeah, there's a book that I have, and I've done a little bit of it. That I'll have to go find it. It's like the wild edibles of
Yes.
Texas. And Daniel, you were with me when we went on that walk with that guy who took us on a wild edible walk. Um, and some of those things are so amazingly delicious. There is a
hmm
small little, I can't remember the name of the plant. It looks like a clover. It looks like a four-leaf clover, but that's not what it is. And it grows all over the place, and everybody thinks it's a weed, and it tastes like lemon, and it is
Hmm.
amazing. And whenever it grows, I pick it and I throw it on my salads, and it's like eating lemon pepper. I mean, it's just amazing. And just going on a wild edible walk, and if you can
Wow.
learn some of that, like the book's like $50, but if you use it, and I don't have the time to use it, and I don't have access to some of the places to use it, but if you can use that, it will offset its cost and give you foods that are much more rich in minerals, much more rich in vitamins, much more what you should be eating because you're
So
literally
if you
picking them from the ground.
what you have to imagine is pretend like that everything's gone. Okay? Pretend like you can't drive through Starbucks. You can't go to the grocery store. You can't go anywhere. You've got to survive. That's what you should eat. That's all there is to it. So you drink
Yeah.
water, you drink milk from a cow. You have to kill the cow. You just drank the milk from to eat him. You got chickens, you find meat, you find squirrels or whatever it is, just not skunks. And
Squirrels are
you
great.
eat. Yeah,
Squirrels are great because they come with their own grease. There's
but
so
they're
much
so
fat and
cute.
stuff on them. They are, and they're tree rats, right? But as far as like harvesting small animals, because everybody thinks if the end of the world they'll go kill deer or whatever. The people who are going to live are the ones who can hunt small game, right? That's
Yeah.
that's
Oh
that
yeah.
that is the subsistence food in pre-World War II America, which is why most people knew how to shoot a single shot 22, because you use single shot 22s to kill possums and raccoons and squirrels, and possum tastes good, and raccoon
hmm
tastes fine, and squirrels taste good, but squirrels have so much grease in them that you can basically throw anything else and they fry. Like if you, it'll fry itself.
They're filled with this is terrible.
They
They're
eat
filled with
nuts.
nut oil.
Yeah,
They're
they're full of
filled
nut oil.
with all the oil from all the
Oh,
nuts
That's
that
what
they
they
eat.
eat. Yeah,
So if you
they've
think
got.
about it, they're marinated in peanut oil, like before you even, because that's all they're eating is walnuts
that's
and
cool.
In
yeah.
fact, you
So
need like
they taste nutty. They're really
you
good.
you
You
need
could
like
use their meat for
one
oil.
squirrel.
Hmm.
You need like one squirrel for every 3 or 4 rabbits, or you'll die because the rabbit doesn't have enough fat and oil in the meat to keep you alive. It will keep you alive short term, but not long term. You will actually
Okay.
starve to death. Just like there are certain in Europe, there's certain reindeer and things like that that during certain times of the year they have bled off so much stuff raising their offspring that you can starve to death on their meat because there's not enough of the fats and the other
There's no
things,
caloric intake in the meat at
or
that
there's not
point.
You
enough.
think
Like
you're
The
eating, but you're not getting any nourishment.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
there comes a point like in the starvation process of the body that before you die, essentially, that there's a point where your the meat in your body has no real caloric value to it
hmm
anymore. It's just sinew and stuff.
and
It
so that's why
loses its.
you've got to mix your small game. Fish are great, right? Because fish eat bugs, and bugs are
Oh
really
yeah,
good
fish
and
is
high in
good.
protein. And so if you don't want to eat the bug, which I get, then eat the fish. Another thing that's great, snakes. Snakes are great. super
They're
high
so good.
super high in caloric content. And I've done all of this stuff
Hmm.
because again, I'm a redneck, right? Um, and most people see a possum and they freak out. They'd never think to eat it. Possums are
Yeah.
awesome. You know why? Because when it sees you, it's going to fall over and play dead. So you can walk up and grab it by the tail and hit it in the head with a stick, and you have dinner. It doesn't even run away.
And they eat bad. I mean, possums are actually really good over.
I
They eat
don't
bad
I don't
bugs
like to
and
kill
they.
possums. To be fair, I did it
Yeah.
as an experiment, but possums eat ticks.
Yeah, possums are real good.
Yeah,
But what if you eat a possum that ate a tick that had Lyme disease?
doesn't do anything to
I
you.
think it would. I think when you cook it, you would take care of that.
Well, that
Don't
and
eat it raw.
it doesn't seem to be going through the possum, right? It just
Yeah, they
doesn't
don't. I
seem
don't
to be
think they
going
get
through.
it
Yeah, they don't get the disease.
because I think isn't it a blood disease? It would have to go
It
through
is-
their
Yeah,
it
blood.
is a blood
you would
disease.
think that it would pass through.
Yeah,
them
well, and
onto
we
you, but I
don't-
think the cooking takes care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cooking will probably and to be fair, if you kill wild game, cook it and cook it well because you don't know what it is. Like if I'm out hiking or camping or something and I harvest food during the appropriate season with the appropriate license, I'm gonna just throw that out there. Even if it's fish, I cook it all. I cook it till it's slightly overcooked,
Yeah.
just to be safe, right? Unless I know where if I'm fishing in the lake, I'm not worried about it. But if it's in a creek or something like that, you never know what it's gotten exposed to. And I'll give you an example. In Killeen, I was telling Daniel today, we just had a sewage spill and it went into one of the creeks, and so anything in that creek's now going to be contaminated for 6 weeks to 9 months, depending on whatever dumped into it. You know,
Where
you
does
got
that go?
once it hits the lakes, right, it begins to disperse enough that the pollutant per square whatever of the water, I mean, there's enough volume of the water to disperse it out.
Particulates per million is usually how
Yeah.
they measure that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But again, when I go hiking, I don't drink the water straight. I boil it or strain it. Even when Daniel almost died on me on a hike, I boiled the water before I put it in him.
No, I got super dehydrated. I got really.
We made a
dehydrated.
mistake.
It wasn't,
We decided to go hiking in the middle of the day, and we took off work, and it was 95 degrees,
and it was too
And you
hot,
were
and I was
also
wearing blue
you were
jeans, and I was
almost at your max weight.
I
too,
was
at the time.
super overweight and out of shape, and I hadn't. I mean, we did like a 2 mile. I mean, I made it. I made the
4
hike.
miles.
And-
You made it
yeah, it
4
was
miles,
wild.
and you drank 2 gallons of water along
Yeah.
the way. But I always take a 2-quart pot with me, and we were right next to the river, and I got a fire going, and I got it boiling and in him as fast as I could.
Yeah.
But it was a good 3 gallons of water before he was normal again.
Yeah,
Jeez.
dehydration will sneak up on you. Well, let's
Yeah.
let's wrap it here. I think we've gone a good run. We'll have to do this again. We'll have to keep
Do
talking
we
about
have
this.
good discussions?
Yes.
I
I
didn't
think
get
the
into
big-
any of my other stuff.
I'm so
we'll
sorry.
get to it. We'll have you back and we'll talk about it again. I think the big takeaway at this point, at least, is we're all different. Everybody needs to figure out what works for them, and that's I think
Stop
that's the
drinking
big.
aspartame.
And stop drinking.
Stop drinking
Don't drink your
aspartame.
calories.
And at least read
It's
what's
bad,
in your
bad,
food.
Bad.
Read
Wait,
what's in
let
your
me just
food.
say
Your
one more
food.
thing. What?
Say it.
Oh, I was going to say aspartame. Not only is it highly addictive, so you're getting addicted just to the aspartame. You have to actually taper off when you stop it. You can't just quit cold turkey or you'll do harm to your body. That's the kind of drug it is. Also, it causes weight gain. So you think you're drinking it because you're trying to lose weight. And you don't want to drink real sodas because they have a lot of sugar. You'd be better off drinking the real soda because of what the aspartame does to you. It makes you gain weight. It tricks your mind, and that's why it causes all these problems in your body. So if you could just wean off of it, when you have your stress time, drink a half one of those things and dump the rest out, and then the next time drink a quarter of it and dump. Wean off of it, and eventually you won't.
Yeah,
need it
or just
anymore.
drink whiskey. I mean, hey, at least that's triple distilled, right?
And that's where we're going to end it now. Perfect.
Okay.